Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today we'll be going over the Saint 10.2 release, Galatea. And I'm going to be giving you the rundown on the new features, why to use them, how to use them, and where to find them in Saint. Now there's a couple points to make before we get into the demo. First of all, why we're doing this. Now, we really want to emphasize the business context of these scans and protecting your most critical assets. So showing that context to you and how to identify them is a big part of this release. Now, traditional vulnerability management primarily focused on that record level of detail. Hey, I found something, or, here's the technical detail about it. You should fix it. And the only thing you really got in that information was the alignment with the actual vulnerability identifier, which is a CVE number. And you got a severity, what they call a CVSS base score. That was based on a mathematical algorithm that says if this vulnerability can be exploited, this is how severe the impact to that host could be. But there was no business context. And that's what's been lacking. I don't know if that host is going to be exploited as a local printer that sits inside of the network behind a firewall, or it's the public web server that runs the accounting function, or that maintains our production web server that we do millions of transactions on our shopping cart every day. Is it practically no business impact, or am I going to be out of business? That's what's been lacking. It's the business context side of the house. And that's where the transformation becomes moving from vulnerability management to risk management. And that's what we're looking at here. This is what we're trying to start to leverage in the conversation. Now I need to emphasize the business impact and not only alignment of the vulnerability severity and possibly the threat intelligence. Is it exploited? Is it actively being exploited? Is that host forward facing, or is it within the network boundary behind a lot of security layers? And so by the time you take all of that and correlate it together with business context, I'm no longer looking at that host in terms of IP address and MAC address. I'm looking at it and saying, yes, that's a public web server and it supports my shopping cart and it's the business's most critical asset. So now I can correlate all that together, and now I'm looking at business risk. So the first thing that I wanted to show was asset rules. So you'll notice that there is a new asset rules tab here in the middle of the asset management page. And you click on that and we see what the asset rules look like. So each asset rule, there's something that matches a result from either the scan or the IP address or the scan policy, and then uses that to assign various risk factors for the asset, as well as assigning asset tags to the asset. So for example, if the scan result is a payment page script, then it's going to mark that as a critical asset for the purpose of risk scoring. And then it's going to give us the asset tag function equals e-commerce. And these are just the default built-in rules, but the customer is able to create their own rule set based on their own characteristics of their own targets. So for example, if I were a user and I wanted to add a new rule set to match Microsoft Dynamics servers and mark them as high criticality for the purpose of risk scoring, then I would choose create asset rule. First, I have to enter a name for my rule set. So I'm going to call this my rule set. And then it gives us this form to create a new rule. So the priority is where it's going to go in the orders, the lower priority numbers, or higher priority vulnerabilities. Then what we want to match, in this case, we want to match the installed software. And then I'm going to search for Dynamics. So if the installed software includes Dynamics, then this rule will match. And when this rule matches, we're going to set the asset's criticality to high. And then internet facing and sensitive data, I'm going to set sensitive data to yes, because dynamic servers typically contain sensitive data. And then we're going to just add an asset tag. So I'm just going to say function is accounting in this case. So that's our rule. We create the rule and we see it gets inserted into the top of the list, into the top of our asset rule set. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be at the top. If we're going to be in the middle, we can just drag it down and it'll reorder the rules accordingly. And in adding this new rule, we've also created a new rule set here, which is now called my rule set. So this rule set can be applied to all the existing assets by clicking on this Go button up here. We also see it over here in our scan wizard. So if we go ahead and jump to step 5 of our scan wizard, we'll see that we can select the asset rule set at the scan creation time. And then our new rule set here is one of the options so that we can have this rule set be executed during the scan processing in real time rather than applying rules after the fact. So once the rule set runs, then we can see now in the assets grid, we have these new columns to the right here. For each asset, we can see the asset criticality, whether it's internet facing, and whether the asset stores sensitive data. We can also see what caused each of these fields to get set. So in some cases, it was the user, the admin user, who set that property on the asset. In other cases, it was one of the asset rules, like rule number 1 here, number 8 over here. And then in some cases, it's just a default setting where it was never set by either an asset rule or a user. So it was just left as the default. So all of these different properties of the asset factor into the risk scoring when vulnerabilities are detected. And I'll show you what the risk scores look like in a bit. So I'm going to go over to my analytics now. So this screen is the all results analytics grid, which is familiar to you if you're a longtime Saint user. But there are some new columns over here on the right. These are optional columns, the risk level and the risk score. So the risk level is going to be low, medium, high, or critical. The risk score is going to be the numerical representation of that, which is a number between 0 and 1,000. And the risk score represents the product of the probability of the vulnerability being exploited and the impact it would have if the vulnerability were in fact exploited. So both of these fields are sortable and searchable. So if we want to focus just on the vulnerabilities that present a critical risk, I can choose to filter it by critical. I could also choose to filter numerically. So if I just want to say all of the vulnerabilities with a risk score above 750, we can do it that way as well. And we could also just click sort by the risk score. So if I click on this column, it's doing a descending sort based on the risk score. Click on it again, and then we'll see it opposite direction. So that's a way of looking at risk for vulnerability. We can also look at risk for host scan. So if I click on vulnerability count for host, this grid is a grid which may be familiar to you. But the new column on the right has been added, the risk level, the highest risk, and the aggregate risk. So the highest risk is the highest risk score of any vulnerability which was detected for that host. So for example, for this first host, the highest vulnerability risk which was detected was 320, so that becomes the highest risk score of the host. And that's also how the risk level is determined. It's based on the highest risk vulnerability on the host. So then there's the aggregate risk, which is the sum of the risk scores of all the vulnerabilities on that target. We can also see the risk information in the dashboard. So this is the default Saint dashboard, which is probably already familiar to you if you're a longtime Saint user. But you'll see there is also a built-in Saint risk dashboard. This is a new feature in Saint 10.2. So I'm going to open the Saint risk dashboard, and you'll see here that this gives us a new look at our data. All of it, it's related to the risk. So first we have our overall risk posture, which is high. So this is the average of the risk levels for all the targets which were scanned in this data set. And then we have these panels over here, the critical assets risk. So this shows you what the risk is just for the critical assets. And over here, the sensitive data risk shows you what the risk posture is just for the targets which have sensitive data. And then this last panel here, nothing is showing up because our scan didn't include any external assets. But had the scan included in external assets, then this would also give you a dial showing you what the risk posture is for those external assets. Down here in the bottom left, we see the aggregate raw risk, but this is the total of the risk scores for all the vulnerabilities detected at the scan. And then the highest risk post is over here to the bottom right. So we see 2 targets were scanned, one of them critical risk, the second one having medium risk. And all of these panels have drill downs. So for example, if I want to see why my risk posture is high, I can click on this. And it gives me a grid showing essentially the information we already saw before, showing the targets that were scanned and the highest risk vulnerability detected on each of those targets. If we wanted to see why this particular host was rated critical, we can click on that, and it gives us the grid specific to that host and shows us the risk scores for each host so we can see why those were scored critical. So that's it for the risk analysis. There are a few other new features going out in Saint 10.2 which I wanted to mention. One of those is the ability of bulk import jobs. So previously you were able to bulk export jobs, but then if you wanted to import those into a new installation, you had to do it one by one, which could be kind of annoying. So now there's a better way. If you choose to import the job, then you can choose either a GZ or a TGZ file to upload. If you choose a TGZ, then that file can include multiple jobs all at once, and you can import as a single file and have them all imported at once. So that's a convenient way to bulk import jobs. Another new feature coming out in Saint 10.2 is that we now have an optional column for showing you the hardware vendor of the targets based on the MAC address. So that is the MAC vendor column down at the bottom. So I add that column, and now we can see over here to the right, there's a new column called MAC vendor. And it shows us the hardware vendor based on the MAC address of the machine. So this column will only be populated for targets where the MAC address could be resolved, which typically means the target was on the local network segment, the same network segment as the scanner. So for scans over the internet, usually this will be empty, but for local scans, like if you have a node on site, on premise, then that will be able to resolve the MAC address, and then that will show you the hardware vendor based on that MAC address. So in this case, for the target, we can see that the hardware vendor was Dell, and just like all the other fields in this grid, it's sortable and searchable. So if you want to just focus on, for example, the HP machines, I can type in HP here, and it will filter it down to the HP machines. One last feature I wanted to show was in the scanning options. Under the TCP tab, there's this new option down here at the bottom, Nmap host type certainty. And what this is this allows you to configure in your scan what you want the certainty threshold to be for reporting Nmap host type guesses. So 90 is the default. That means so it only reports guesses that are 90% certain or higher. But in some cases, in some environments where you want to have more accuracy in your host type reporting, then you might want to change this to 100, and then only host type guesses, which are 100% certain, will be reported in your scan results. Or if you want to get more data rather than less, if you're maybe not that concerned about how accurate the guesses are, but you just want to make sure that you get a guess for each target, then you might want to lower this down to say 80%, and then it will make guesses, it'll report any guesses that are 80% certain or higher. So that concludes our demo today. We hope you find this useful, faster, and easier for you to do your job. You know, there may be different uses for these features for different scenarios. For example, if you're an MSP and your problem is, I'm already doing scanning, but I find myself spending a whole lot of time doing this. I would really like to be able to offer more value to the customer rather than just sending them a patch report every month. So how can I work with them to help classify the assets so that when I report to them, I can tell them that I'm adding more value in terms of I'm showing you how we can take these 8,000 findings for the month and show you how these key 40 findings that I found had the highest risk to your business. It may help you show why and where your expertise or our expertise needs to go to give you the most bang for the buck. And that's just one scenario, and we can help you with them all. If you enjoyed the video today, please let us know by commenting, liking, or subscribing for more videos like these in the future. If you want to dig into these features further than what you saw today, just reach out to us and let us know we can help.